So for unit 0.3, we're going to be looking at properties of the real number system. And we have 5 properties that we're going to be looking at. The first property is the commutative property. The commutative property changes the location of the numbers or variables. There are 2 types of commutative property. There's a commutative property for addition, and there's a commutative property for multiplication. I'm going to give you some examples of each. So the commutative property for addition says that I can take something like 3 plus 2 and it is the same as saying 2 plus 3. Does everybody agree with that? What is 3 plus 2? 5. What is 2 plus 3? 5. So they're the same thing. This also applies to when variables are involved. So I'm going to give you another example of addition, but this time with a variable. Let's say I give you x plus 6. That is the same as 6 plus x. So with commutative property, the order is changing. You're flip-flopping them, okay? Let's look at multiplication. With multiplication, commutative property would be something like 5 times 7 is the same as 7 times 5. Let's think about it. What's 5 times 7? 35. What's 7 times 5? 35. Works for variables too. 3 times x is the same as x times 3. So that is commutative property. Okay, the associative property changes the grouping of numbers or variables. And we have an associative property for addition and multiplication as well. Associative property for addition says that I can group, say, 3 plus 4. Oops. And then add 2 to the outside. And that is the same as saying 3 plus, and this time I group 4 plus 2 instead. So the order stays the same, but the way that I grouped the numbers is different. But according to the associative property, both are equal to each other. Let's think about it. On the left-hand side, what's 3 plus 4? 7. What's 7 plus 2? 9. Okay, so let's try to get 9 on the right-hand side. What is 4 plus 2? 6 plus 3? 9. So they're the same. Works with variables as well, okay? So you can do the same thing with variables. Multiplication is very similar. It's the same as saying, for example, 2 times 5 times 3 on the outside. Now, if I were to regroup that, it would be 2 on the outside times 5 times 3. They are equal to each other. So the order stays the same, but where we put the parentheses is different. All right, distributive property is our favorite property. It tells us that whatever you multiply every number inside the parentheses by the number on the outside of the parentheses. So let's say, for example, I have 3 times 5 plus 2. So distributive means that I'm going to distribute that 3 to everything inside the parentheses. So I draw arrows to everything so that I can see what's going on here. And then I'm going to be multiplying. So this is the same as saying 3 times 5 plus 3 times 2. Okay, we're also going to look at the identity properties. We have two types of identity properties. The first one is additive identity. So what do you think it has to do with? Addition. The additive identity is 0 because when you add 0 to any number, it does not change the value of that number. So the identity properties are all about keeping a number's value the same. For example, if I have 3 plus 0, what would my answer be? Still 3. Okay? So the additive identity is 0 because when I add 0 to any number, I still get the same number. The multiplicative identity is 1 because when you multiply any number by 1, it does not change the value of that number. So just like adding 0 doesn't change the value, multiplying by 1 doesn't change the value. So the multiplicative identity would be 1. So if I was to take 3 times 1, what would my answer be? 3. It stays the same, right? So 1 would be the multiplicative identity. Okay, so our last two properties are the inverse properties. Inverse properties are the number that gets us to the identity. So the additive inverse would be the opposite of a number. Because, say I have 5, what would the opposite of 5 be? Everybody. Negative 5. If I add 5 and negative 5, what do I get? 0. And 0 was the additive identity. So it's whatever gets me to the identity for that operation. So with an additive inverse, that means you're going to take the opposite of a number. You're going to change the sign. So then multiplicative inverse is the number that's going to get me to 1, which is the reciprocal of a number. Say that I give you 2 over 3. What is the reciprocal of 2 over 3? Everybody.
3 over 2.
3 over 2. So when I take 2 over 3 and multiply it by 3 over 2, what do I get? 1. Okay? So multiplicative inverse is the reciprocal because when you multiply them, you get 1, which is the identity. Additive inverse is the opposite because when you add them, you get 0, which is the additive identity. And those are all the number properties.